fifth grade, we are on our virtual field trip to go check out some erosion and some weathering. So let's go and do this thing. I have my sidekick Kucher here. Let's get started. All right, we are on our very first part of our virtual field trip, and we stopped at my great uncle or my grandpa's farmland, and we're gonna check out some weathering and erosion and stuff here. We kind of got to get out of the city a little bit to see what nature is really doing that humans aren't really stopping. So let's check this out. All right. So one very good example, a long time ago, my great uncle walked through the fields of our land and he picked up all these rocks and put them in these piles. And if you can see right here, you can see a big divot where there's would have been kind of a micro landslide. So you can kind of see how everything right there is really narrow, where a big pile of rocks goes down. So yeah, basically all of those rocks eventually slid down from water, from ice, and yeah, basically were eroded. And you can see the weathering as the ice and water and wind is breaking down this mount of, well, right now it's just kind of a giant mass of rock and soil, and eventually they will crumble into smaller pieces than this and become just sediment. And yeah, so right now this is weathered. I am causing erosion by moving it, and as it moves and where it lands, that is where the deposition happens. So there's one example. We'll take a walk. Take a walk around all of these giant rock piles. I found some rocks over here that have big splits in them from the weathering. You can see also right here, it kind of, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen this before, but it's kind of like deserty almost. So when dry weather causes the ground to crack, and that is a form of weathering right there. Here's also a good example of erosion. So this one's natural. Here's a plot of land, and all of this land crumbled underneath. So it almost looks like what a cliff would look like. It's basically like a mini version. Here's some down here too. And you can kind of notice that it usually happens where there isn't grass or different roots. Okay, so right here we have a big old rock, and you can see the cracks where every single year we have snow or rain, different types of moisture, and the rainwater will continue to run down that crack. In the winter, it will freeze, and that snow and that ice will go into that crack, and it'll push, like it'll expand, going out like this, and eventually it's gonna push it so that the rock cracks off. And wind kind of helps with that a little bit, but not very much with heavy rocks. And here's a good example right here. This was just like this when I found it. So this rock was weathered, and I can't actually figure out how it was sitting. I don't know, I played with it a little bit, but basically this rock was connected until eventually it broke apart and it eroded, so it moved. And eventually it'll move and erode and slide all the way down until it's down there. So there is our very first example of erosion. We're gonna take another walk down to the road, because I'm sure you guys have all seen examples of erosion on dirt roads. So I'll see you there in a second. All right, this is a terrible example because this road isn't really that bad, but if you can see this shiny part right here, that is from water. And you guys, many people have probably seen this before. I'm sure you see it everywhere. But you can actually see the flow of where the water was. And this is basically a small version of a mudslide. So basically, so much rainwater will wash up these roads and they will flow through this crack. And this crack continues to build deeper and deeper and deeper, taking all the sediment with it until eventually it will deposit the sediment. So like down here, there's quite a bit more soil than there is here. And if you imagine the V-shaped valley like a river, eventually these little streams of water will build a V shape. And yeah, it's pretty cool how they just pick up and carry sediments and move them around. Now this is just a road, so it's not so hard to, it's not so hard to deal with. But if you imagine a large version of this, where people who live in areas where mudslides can occur, they can be super dangerous and devastating to their houses and stuff. Imagine this being life-size and just destroying all of the land and all of the people's houses and all of the where the animals are, the pastures and stuff like that. Could be very devastating. So now my noble steed and I are getting into the vehicle and we are going to go to part 2, the next step of our trip. So we'll see you guys there. Alright, we are at stop 2 and we're just going to look at this one really quickly. I'm sure you guys have all seen something like this where a hill or a bump of land is actually collapsed, and that is a very good example of erosion. The weathering causes the collapse and it eventually deposits down below it. So there's a very good example of that. We're on the second or the third place of our field trip, and we are at one of the places that has the most erosion because of the running water, because of the wind, because of the ice. And yeah, so we're gonna check out the shore. You guys can take different areas. I'm taking the most obvious one so that you guys can kind of explore. I encourage all of the people who live in town to come down to the park this week sometime and find some examples of weathering or erosion. So yeah, we're gonna go down to the beach and check it out. So my noble steed back there is running around. Hopefully it's this nice for you guys next week, because Cooter, come. Alright. And she is loving it. Alright, well, we have a perfect example right now because now the water's starting to go. So, this winter we had the lake freeze, and the snow did cause, or the ice did cause the lake to expand, and it made the lake wider than it is now. So you can see right here where the ice pushed onto the lake, and you can see these huge ridges. It's actually pretty cool. And as the water melted, it was a little bit less than what it was when it was ice, and then it is gradually evaporating. So now we have a little bit of a beach or a shore, which is kind of cool. And you can see all the layers of where it's been melting and evaporating. And yeah, eventually it hopefully won't be super shallow or anything like that. But yeah, it's kind of a cool example of just how powerful that ice pushes the soil. This is all deposition right here, so I hope that you guys can come and check this out and see just how powerful erosion can be. Alright, here's another great example of how erosion damages roads and why we always have so much road construction. Right here pretty much. So before this winter, this was a pretty clean road. There weren't really, there was a crack here, but it wasn't this bad. And basically all of the snow and ice expanded in the cracks, just like I was showing you guys. And now it's pretty much crumbled. It's just rock and dirt. So pretty crazy. So you can imagine what happens to the roads with all of the ice that expands in the cracks in roads, and then how the vehicle's heavy weight puts that pressure in that crack, and it forces the ice to go into that crack even further. And yeah, pretty crazy stuff. Alright, so the next spot on our journey is actually my backyard. So you may be wondering, especially if you live in a town, how does erosion, why is that even important for me to know? And if you are looking at buying a house, living in a house, building a house, anything like that, that's really important to know. So here's one of my sheds, and this shed doesn't have very much support. So if you can see underneath it, the ground is starting to erode away. Now, that's okay for a shed, because you can always move a shed. But the house is a lot more important. You guys can say hi to Ellie. Hi, Ellie. It's Ellie's house. Alright, so we are at my house. You can see this concrete underneath it. And that concrete is important because it makes sure that if the ground is eroding away, the house will still be stable. And you can see right here, there is erosion that is breaking apart that concrete. So eventually that will need to be replaced. Back here, it's kind of crumbling a little bit too. So that's really important if you are planning on ever owning a house or living in a house or just having a house in general. So the very last spot on our field trip is sidewalks. So you can see right here, the sidewalk is unlevel. This sidewalk is getting pushed up because of the land underneath it. Now this one is because of the tree roots, which is kind of a, it'd be like a natural or a biological cause of erosion. So definitely interesting, especially when you're trying to build a city and there are natural things like that, like trees that cause erosion that will cost money to fix. So it costs money to fix sidewalks and stuff in cities, and yeah. Thanks guys for taking a journey with me and Kucher. We enjoyed your company, and we can't wait to see your pictures come in and your videos of your own field trips. So have a fun time exploring.